Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Circle Club Show. I'm Tyrone, joined here by Corey of What's Next, and we're talking Episode 8, House of the Dragon. The Lord of the Tides. What an episode, Corey. Let's waste no time. Let's jump right into these discussions. Viserys reclaims his time. He had a Kamala Harris moment. He said, "Excuse me, did we already discuss this? I'm the king. I'm the king." What did you think about that?
Honestly, this is one of the most moving scenes I've ever seen in just the Game of Thrones universe, right? Pulling in Game of Thrones itself and House of the Dragon. I was really moved by the scene. I thought it was set up very well through a lot of the dialogue that had transpired earlier on throughout the season. And seeing Viserys really come to just the defense of Rhaenyra was great to see, right? Like Rhaenyra has a lot of this pressure building up. Things are starting to cave on her. The crows are so to speak coming to feast on the Targaryens to try to take that power from them, and to see Viserys just kind of come in, put his foot down, something that we've seen him do a little bit as the episodes progress, but to really do it in a moment where he was down and out for the count was awesome to see, right?
Loved it.
I just think everything that played out through it, through the dialogue, the visual representation on how Viserys was acting, it was just an extremely, extremely moving scene from us.
I loved it, and when he was talking to Rhaenyra in his chambers, he was sort of at this point of begging for some sort of support. She's like almost like, "Daddy, I'm lost, help," and it showed like. I think the thing that we sort of forget, since there's been so many episodes in Time Jump, is in the original episodes, he was saying, "We only have each other. It's only me and you left." And I think he's always looked out for her interest. He's looked out the interest of the realm, but he's always believed in her. And I think there was this sort of undertone. You're like, I'm not sure if he really thinks that she'd be right for this, but I think he always has felt that way. And for him to be on his final breaths, he can barely walk. I think to your point, it shows how strong he is, and we thought he was a weak king, a king who couldn't make the right decisions. But this was a moment of strength. It was a moment of backing that he needed, and also him just bringing the family together, right? Like saying, "I want dinner with my family," and that's what is going to happen. It was just a very strong moment for him, and I thought it was, as you said, one of the best moments in the whole Game of Thrones universe. Which leads us to Lord Vaemond calling those kids bastards. It was like one of those moments where you're like, it's like you're in class with your boys, right? And you're like, "Yo, stop egging this teacher on. Like, this is a substitute teacher, but stop egging the substitute teacher on." And he just pulled it out and said, look at those kids. Those kids, they are not in this family." And I'm like, you're already like hot, bro. I know you're mad that your kids aren't getting Driftmark, but watch it. And when he said, "Bastard," your boy Damon handled work. How did you feel?
Yeah, I felt like I really enjoyed this scene, right? Because I feel like to this point, right, like it's obviously been obvious that they are bastards, right?
Yes.
Everyone is talking about it, but they're still like tiptoeing around it. They won't actually blurt
Say it.
out the words, right? Because they know the weight of saying those words and the consequences that come with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think something about Vaemond that's I think really important is to understand there are people. It reminds me almost of like Ned Stark, right? Like some people in this universe do care about honor, do care
Yeah.
about doing the right things and having the right things be fulfilled, right? And I think for him, uh, being in this moment where his family's line is really going to end, right? Like
Yeah.
there's really no male there to continue that name on for them. That's
By
true to
blood.
blood,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's by blood. And I think for him, he understands, I think, the consequences that come about this, and why he's I feel like tried to go about it, tried to be politically correct in the sense of like, hey, this is how it should be done. And he got to that breaking point where he's like, I'm over this. Like I'm
Yeah.
voicing truth, and I don't care if it costs me my life, but I'm gonna be the one that says it so that everybody
Mm.
everybody who already knows it hears it, and it becomes true, right? And I think in that moment where you're just sitting there waiting, like, oh my God, is he gonna say this? Like,
Yeah.
like is he really? Because to this point, like every time Viserys has kind of stepped in and put that foot down, everybody kind of just shuts up and is quiet, right? And Vaemond really wasn't having it at this point, right? I think it leads into why a lot of people feel like Viserys is weak, right?
Yeah.
And he really is the first person that calls him out on it, right? Like, you're a weak king. You won't do what's necessary or what is right. And I think that was powerful in really showing that there are people within Westeros, more importantly, that are fed up with how things are being run by the Targaryens. That special treatment that they
and
get.
it was huge too for Viserys to like tell the guards, I'll have your or tell Vaemond, I'll have your tongue for that, because I think there is a version that we believe of who he is where we're like, he's gonna let it slide, he's gonna say we've got bigger issues, or like, oh, he's sick. But I think that last moment he was like, it was, again, he does not care about it being blood or not. You are a Targaryen by name, by marriage, whatever. We are family. And you see in that dinner scene, he means it. Otto was sitting there. Otto's not really family. He is father-in-law, I guess. But like, I think even Otto, bringing him back, it's because you don't bring Otto back because, oh, I need another hand. Like, there's plenty of other candidates, right? It's because he's picking someone that he knows, he's respected, he trusted, has been around. They're family. You know, and I think when you look at the Hightower name, I don't know legacy-wise what, you know, how important they are or what they mean, but I think in this specific show, House of the Dragon, you can't deny and say that the Hightower family is not family with the Targaryens. They are essentially cousins and brothers and sisters. Like, there's a relationship there. And, you know, that's a great transition for this conversation about Rhaenyra and Alicent. I think there was a point where Rhaenyra and Alicent, it felt they sort of went their different ways, and like there was no sort of turning back. There was a moment throughout this episode where it was like, wow, both of these women realize that they've both been essentially pawns to the system or the patriarchy, and all of the decisions that have been made around them aren't really their own. And I think they sort of had this realization of like, man, we used to be friends or lovers, whatever. But, you know, we used to be super close, and look at us now, right?
Yeah, and I think something to that specifically, right? Like, I think you bring up obviously the valid point, right? There's a lot of outside influences that drive actions, especially on Alicent's side, right? Like, she's very, very motivated by a lot of the decisions her father was having her make, right? And I think as she comes into form and is getting her voice a little bit, right? I think she is more prone to speak how she truly feels. And I think in these moments within the dinner when especially Rhaenyra comes forth, because Rhaenyra always seems like she was trying, right?
Yes.
And Alicent was always kind of pushing her off.
Yes.
And Rhaenyra being the one that comes out and kind of toasts to the Queen Regent first, is that first, I think, step towards them coming together. And I think Alicent always wanted that in the first place. I think Alicent's concerns or fear came from her father saying the things that Rhaenyra would do, right? And I think we always knew Rhaenyra wasn't going to kill Alicent's kids, right?
No.
Rhaenyra didn't want to do that, right? She didn't want to kill Alicent. She just wanted to be friends.
I mean, she let Rhaenyra go, right? Like, she's a loving person. That's not who she is.
Totally, right? And I think Alicent getting that like confirmation from Rhaenyra, like, and seeing a lot of those similarities, right? Especially like with her being pregnant now and just being a mother, right? Like a lot of their similarities are the same, right? And they should stick together, right? And I think Viserys obviously helps drive that message across, being the leader he is. But you can see Otto over there, right? Kind of not about it, right? And I think at the end of the day, like we talk about with consequences, there's consequences to actions. And to this point, there's been way too much time that's passed and way too many rifts there that have branched off, that has led to the sons especially having resentment towards the cousins, and the cousins vice versa, right? So I think there's an issue at hand with the decisions that Viserys made in making Rhaenyra queen, and then the subsequent actions that Alicent and Rhaenyra did had led to this feud. And because of this feud lasting for so long, although Alicent and Rhaenyra themselves had a relationship there before, these other individuals didn't, right? And I think because of that, it continues to lead towards the civil war and the problems that are happening between these two families, because ultimately the cousins and Otto and all of them don't have the type of relationship that Alicent and Rhaenyra once had.
Or perspective,
And as you can see within this, right, like Rhaenyra doesn't really care for the throne like we probably thought she did, right?
Yes.
And I think Alicent doesn't care as much for Aegon getting to that throne as much as Otto did, right? And I think because of that, there's a lot of people that are motivated towards certain outcomes, right? And I think that motivation completely outweighs the power that those two have within the relationship that they have. And I think Viserys dying, and especially as we get into the things he says in his final breath, I think there was a little bit too much of a rift too within the decision that needs to be made for who is that ruler at the end. That will bridge a little bit more of a gap between Rhaenyra and Alicent, that might be that last connection that could save the realm from this war, but ultimately won't, because Alicent will be coming back and saying Aegon should be king, but not because of her father and any of these other reasons, but because of a simple miscommunication from Viserys, right? And I think that will lead to more beef between Rhaenyra and Alicent because of just some miscommunication between them.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add real quick is you also see with Aegon, when he assaults that handmaid, there's really just no repercussions for it, right? He sleeps with her. They make her drink the little tea thing, right? And then you think about how essentially Rhaenyra had the same thing happen to her when she was his age, and it was a huge deal, a huge scandal. Everyone's freaking out, right? So, and that's what I love about this House of the Dragon show. They give you such good perspective. There's great callbacks to things. Yeah, great parallels, things going on here, right? And in this final breath, it's ironic that we're talking Rhaenyra and Alicent, because when Viserys is giving this final breath about, the Song of Fire, Ice and Fire, gets passed down to each king and ruler, right? It's interesting how he thinks he's talking to Rhaenyra, but he's speaking to Alicent, and that little miscommunication, it's almost as if everything that was a nice bow and let's be kumbaya and family, it's all gone from a simple miscommunication. I thought that was a perfectly executed final scene.
Yeah, and I like that, because typically I feel like that would be looked at as a throwaway, right? And I think there's a lot of things he did within that scene that made it make sense and why he didn't understand that was Rhaenyra, right? I think first and foremost, the milk of the poppy, right? He's obviously loopy when he's on that. He's not fully there, right? So that's the first and obvious one. The second thing, he has no right eye. And if you look at the scene, Alicent is on his right side, so he's never really ever looking at Alicent, right? So he's never going to make that physical connection that it's not Rhaenyra. And obviously a dying man is more so just trying to get out of his last thoughts, and because he's on the milk of the poppy, they're not full thoughts, right? So although we as the audience understand what he was referencing there, Alicent doesn't, because at the end of the day, this is the secret, right? It's only supposed to be passed to the kings, which is another question for a different video and a different day. But why does it need to be a secret is something I'm wondering a little bit more of, right? And what that does to the Targaryen reign by letting that out, right? I feel like it would only bolster their reign. So I'm curious as to why that really is ultimately a secret for the realm, but nonetheless, because it is a secret, it leads to this miscommunication. And I think it's important that it's done that way because of what I was saying before. I think the rift between Alicent and Rhaenyra seems to have been mended because of that dinner, right? And I think even after the boys fight, you can see Alicent and Rhaenyra they show the scene of them even still talking there, right? Like they're not divided within that scene. They send the boys off. make them go cool off wherever they are, but they're still cool within that scene. So her being the queen regent, right? And Alicent being the queen regent and Rhaenyra being the heir to the Iron Throne, they, in and of themselves, have the power to ultimately squash all of this beef, right?
They do.
But because of
now you have
this
this legacy and this little communication involved. Yep.
You need to continue that rift between Rhaenyra and Alicent for this to ultimately pop off. And I think with them having mended it there, it shows the true motivations behind Alicent and Rhaenyra perfectly for us as the audience. But the action behind why Alicent will choose Aegon and still back Aegon makes so much more sense for us to understand not only why the Civil War ends up popping off and why Alicent still is on that side, but still gives us a great understanding behind a lot of these characters' motivations. Why Aemon might not like his cousins, why Jace and Luke don't like Aemon or Aegon, why Otto doesn't like the other side, and why Daemon might not like the other side, but why more importantly, Alicent and Rhaenyra are still going to be feuding in a moment and with characters that ultimately still wanted to be friends, right? And I think the only thing that can continue to separate them beyond this is Alicent's not backing Rhaenyra in the Iron Throne, right? And I think that's the only thing that can separate them, and making this the reason that separates them makes it so juicy for us too, because we know what happens with the Song of Ice and Fire. We know how it plays out, right? And we understand its importance. But all these people in Westeros, to my point of why is it a secret, don't, right? And what leads to what we see in Game of Thrones. So watching this secret, and because it's a secret, ultimately to the reason why this war ends up happening makes perfect sense. Because the way this show started within the first episode in the Targaryen, and when the king says, this is what it needs to be and this is how it should be, and having Viserys also keep that same tone, should lead to the family still sticking together. But because of this one secret and the miscommunication of it is ultimately why the Civil War pops off. It ultimately is the Targaryen's fault because of the secret being left a secret at the end of the day.
All right. Well, listen, folks, that is going to do it for episode 8. Another great review, another fire review, must I say, from Corey. The Lord of the Ties. I would say this is probably one of the best episodes we've gotten this season. This show has been phenomenal. Make sure you guys subscribe because we make new content every single day, every single week. And we will see you all in the next video. Peace.
I actually thought that was really good.